Hi folks, this is Doc Rob Sivers, the Carb Addiction Doc. And today I'm desperately asking for your help. We need your help. We've provided a lot of content for you. Now we need your help. And your help is for yourself as well. The US Dietary Guidelines, those things that we call the food pyramid or the food plate, that have been the foundation of our legislative dietary guidelines for the last 50 plus years, since 1977, are due for renewal this year. And guess what? They include zero, bupkis, nothing about low carb or high fat. If you've done well on a ketogenic diet, if you've done well by cutting out your carbohydrates, if that is your lifestyle, if that is what you are doing for your health, to keep you healthy, to get rid of disease and illness, there is zero mention. In fact, quite the opposite. There is a disregard for that in the US Dietary Guidelines. And we are appealing to you today to help us to pump the brakes on the release of these guidelines, so that we can look at some of the science of this. The US Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is meeting on the 11th of July. That's at the end of next week. Please, please, please help us to access your senators, access your congressmen, access the folks in charge of that advisory committee, and please help them to pump the brakes on the release of this religious belief of dietary guidelines that has no relevance to human biology or scientific fact. And let's at least help them to consider the science. It is absolutely ridiculous to think about this, but these dietary guidelines only address so-called healthy Americans. They're pretty much almost nobody in this country on the standard American diet is healthy. They have no relevance to people with chronic diseases, despite the fact that that's a small minority of our patients, of our people in this country. The guidelines affect school lunch programs, feeding the elderly. They affect the legislation about food. They affect food industry. And here's what they most importantly affect. If you've ever been to your regular doctor and said, look, I'm on a keto diet, I'm on a carnivore diet, I'm not eating carbohydrates, and they slam you and they lambaste you and they tell you how dangerous it is because for the healthcare industry, the dietary guidelines are standard of care. That's the best we've got, and it's standard of care for us. So most doctors, now obviously I've decided not to, at great risk, medical, legal peril and risk for me, that I'm not following the advice of the dietary guidelines. But your doctors do that, especially if they work for big corporations or hospital organizations. They're compelled to follow those rules. And if they break them and something happens, they're liable. We have to change these archaic guidelines that are based on belief that fat is bad for us and sugar is necessary in the human diet. Please help us by blogging about it. If you've got any blog of any sort, I don't even care if it's not in a health industry space, but certainly the big guys, calling out Ken Berry, calling out Jason Fung, even though he's in Canada, the whole world is influenced by the US dietary guidelines. The Australians follow the same rules. The Canadians are heavily influenced by this. So the guys with big followings, I've just mentioned two of my buddies, but please, please, please get out there, blog about this. Help and encourage your followers and people that you've touched to get to your senators, to get to your legislators. And how do you do this? At the bottom part of this video, in the writing at the bottom of this video, you'll find all the links. If you've got a Twitter account, get on Twitter and talk about it. The big Twitter storm is coming on July the 7th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the goal there is to urge just a delay of the release so that we have greater representation to represent the scientific facts. The sad part is that the Dietary Guidelines Committee has completely excluded clinical trials on weight loss. It's all still the old beliefs, and they're just perseverating those same beliefs. For example, the American cardiology group just on the 20th of May, published an article saying there is no evidence to support the fact that the consumption of saturated fat is bad for us. And yet, despite that, the dietary guidelines still keep us at below 10% of saturated fat in our diet. That's the recommendation. So every doctor, every person you talk to that is beholden to that standard of care has to promulgate that message. And that message is clearly wrong, not just based on myself and human biology, but based upon an enormous amount of evidence. So please, please, please help us to change that. If you've benefited from a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, please make sure that you're on this bandwagon. We've provided so much content to you for free, not just myself, but so many people out there. Support us in what we're doing. Protect us from medical legal action as physicians. Help us to change those guidelines for the future of America. The exclusion of virtually all science on low carbohydrate diets, that's ludicrous. They don't even take that into consideration. If you're on a low carb or a keto diet, do you get pissed off like I do every January when Forbes magazine publishes the 10 or 20 top diets and the keto diet isn't even on that list? Well, this is one of the reasons why. This is one of the reasons why. The continued use of black box magic methodology to tell us what we should and shouldn't eat, based on beliefs from 50 years ago. That's what governs the science. That is crazy. And then the final piece is there's a complete lack of transparency about all the major conflicts of interest. The people that support the dietary guidelines, the industry that supports it, for their own profit, for their own benefit. Isn't it time we got away from those folks that can advertise their wares with impunity because the guidelines say they can? Please help us before July the 11th. And focus on your success. Focus on your story. Tell your story. There's not a single person that has sustainably followed a ketogenic diet that doesn't have success as long as they keep doing it. There's no other diet that can compare with that. Tell your success story about your weight loss, about your diabetes reversal, about your cardiovascular health improvement, about your polycystic ovarian syndrome improvement, about the fact that your gut is functioning better, you're less inflamed. Tell your story. Your child may not be having seizures anymore. There's over 100 clinical trials out there, none of which are included in their recommendations. Tell your story to your congressman or your senator. Please, please, please help us. And Nina Teicholz, the author of The Big Fat Surprise, who really brought out the fact that fat isn't bad for us. Great book if you haven't read it. But she's spearheading a lot of this from the legislative and the writing perspective. Support her. Go to the Nutrition Coalition website or go to the lowcarbaction.org website. We've made it easy for you to sign up, not to those organizations necessarily, you're most welcome to if you do, but to find and access your congressman. There's form letters out there. There's a variety of different things. There's toolkits of draft proposals that makes it easy for you to get out there. But if you like my content, if you appreciate what we do, recording these on the weekends, it's Sunday the 5th of July today, I'm recording this on my spare time. And that's when we record our videos for you for free. Please pay this back. Pay this back by spending a few minutes on Twitter, a few minutes on email, a few minutes writing your congressman, writing your legislator, telling your story. Be positive. Don't beat them up and be negative. Be positive and tell them your story that is nowhere to be found in the current United States dietary guideline recommendations. We call that the standard American diet or the SAD diet, which is really the cause of disease. And there's strong evidence that those guidelines cause diabetes, cause obesity, and directly cause so many of the metabolic diseases that we have. And the converse, that if you stop eating that way, you can reverse these diets. But nowhere in the guidelines is that mentioned. We're not asking for the guidelines to change completely. We're just asking for the guidelines to include sentences about the fact that it's okay to eat saturated fat and it's okay not to eat carbohydrates. That's all we're asking for, a slight change, neither of which is currently there. Please help us out. Please take action. Thank you very much.